Former Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, he was just on television, gave an interview. And of course, they had to ask him about Bitcoin. And he had some wild things to say. Before I go ahead and share my opinion, let's just hear what Ben had to say for himself. Here's the video.
Bitcoin and other currencies, cryptocurrencies whose value changes minute to minute, they've been successful as a speculative asset. And you're seeing the downside of that right now. But they were intended to be a substitute for fiat money. And I think in that respect, they have not succeeded. Because if Bitcoin were a substitute for fiat money, you could use Bitcoin to go buy your groceries. And the main use of Bitcoin is mostly for underground economy activities and things that are illegal or illicit. I don't think that Bitcoin is going to take over as an alternative form of money.
You don't buy into the idea of it as being a store of value or some kind of version of digital gold.
Gold has underlying use value. You can use it to fill cavities. The underlying use value of Bitcoin is to do ransomware or something like that. So one of the other risks that Bitcoin has is that it could at some point be subject to a lot more regulation.
Now, of course, after watching that, you're either cringing or you're laughing, because there's only one of two different emotions you could have. This guy used to be an insider of the Federal Reserve. He was about as close to the money printer as you could possibly get. And of course, because of the Cantillonian effect, he ended up profiting from it. Now, put that aside for 1 second. Let's look at Bitcoin, some of the statements that he made. They're just factually inaccurate. He made a statement that most of the Bitcoin activity is for illicit purposes. But we have people like the former acting director of the CIA who's gone onto the blockchain, analyzed the transactions, and come out to an estimation that 0.4% of all transactions are for nefarious or illicit purposes. That means that less people use on a percentage basis Bitcoin for illicit purposes compared to US dollars and fiat currencies, where it's estimated that $2 trillion a year is just for money laundering. Now, of course, if we then go and we look at things like gold, he talks about the fact that gold has value because you can use it to fill your cavity. If that's really why you think gold has value, then you're an idiot. Ultimately, what we've got to remember is that yes, gold is used for all sorts of different manufacturing purposes, but it's less than 10% of the use of gold. Gold has served as a store of value for centuries. And ultimately, Bitcoin has been outperforming gold, dollars, and pretty much every other asset on the planet for the last decade. Bitcoin is used by 150 million people or more. And to say that it's failed is comical. To say that it's not a store of value when it's outperformed all the other stores of value means that you don't know what you're talking about. And then to even say things like you can't use Bitcoin to literally go and buy things at the grocery store. Yet, at the Bitcoin conference, we saw Jack Mallers and Strike say, we've literally partnered with NCR and Blackhawk, and we're bringing it to all the top retailers, for everyone from Shopify all the way down to Starbucks, Walmart, and McDonald's. So I don't know exactly where Ben Bernanke wants people to be able to spend Bitcoin, but obviously in those stores, you're able to use the Bitcoin network and that payment system to go ahead and buy the goods and services. Now, of course, this goes back to the classic quote, never expect a man to understand something if his salary depends on his ignorance. And so I actually think that Ben Bernanke understands Bitcoin really well. He probably has done a bunch more work on it than he's letting on. And he may even be convinced that there is some value there. But the more important thing is that he's trotted out on national television and he shares all the talking points. The problem is that his talking points are back from 2014. If he's going to be a critic, at least come up with the new ones, things like ESG concerns and others. But instead, he's just using the old regurgitated things that have been disproven time and time again. The worst part about this is that people would actually have more trust in these types of bureaucrats if they simply came out and they said, hey, Bitcoin seems to be pretty interesting. The technology is obviously being adopted by people. I don't think it's going to be nearly as big as those people think, but I do see that it has value. And I can understand in an environment where there's undisciplined monetary and fiscal policy, many of these individuals are looking for a store of value that they can hold on to. Now, of course, that's not what he's saying, and therefore, nobody trusted him already because of some of the past work that he had done. But now, even more people are starting to see that Bitcoin simply exposes the mindset of the bureaucrats. It's not about seeking the truth. It's not about actually looking at the data. It's simply about regurgitating the exact same talking points over and over and over again. But ultimately, their opinion doesn't matter. Neither does mine and neither does yours. The market is the ultimate referee. And so far, according to the market, Bitcoin is winning. It's the best performing asset over the last decade. It's been adopted by 150 plus million people around the world. And it continues to settle billions and billions and billions of dollars of transactions every single day. Regardless of what anyone in the world thinks, Bitcoin continues to produce block after block after block of transactions. and no one's opinion can stop that.